is visiting Mount Rushmore.
The leftovers, yeah, that's probably a deep pile of leftovers.
Or somebody's buried them.
Somebody's hiking up there, Mom.
Yeah?
Yeah, see?
Well, there is a walking trail that goes that way. If we have time later, we can maybe do that one.
It was, critics said, a preposterous idea, an outrage against South Dakota's Black Hills. What arrogant stone carver could possibly improve upon God's mountain sculpture? But as the faces of the great men sprang lifelike from the mountain, Rushmore simply overwhelmed its critics and dazzled the world, just as the Republican ideals it honored had inspired and dazzled mankind in 1776. The project was conceived by a gentle scholar, Doane Robinson, in 1923, at a time when the nation was prosperous and cocky. Robinson proposed that several granite spires in the Black Hills be carved into massive human figures: Lewis and Clark, Buffalo Bill Cody, Chief Red Cloud, or other Western heroes. To the sculptor he called upon for help, Gutzom Borglums, this idea seemed as bold and brilliant and as fragile as a rainbow in the western sky. The son of Danish immigrants, Borglums was a man who dreamed big and talked big, a man ideally suited to the times and to the carving of mountains. American art ought to be monumental, he said, in keeping with American life, and Rushmore ought to be colossal, in keeping with American achievements. Borglums found the needles impressive but too weathered for sculpting. Mount Rushmore, however, seemed perfect. Stone with a finer grain and texture, a mountain big enough for Borglums' imagination. Borglums argued that a monument on this scale should represent our entire national experience. His final concept would be a tribute to the founding, preservation, growth, and development of the nation. These events would be symbolized by the images of 4 Americans who never lost sight of the simple idea that man has a right to be free and to be happy: Washington, Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln. Jefferson had articulated the central idea of the American democracy. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," he wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." More than 20 years later, when Jefferson became president, the red-haired Virginian also proved to be a great nation builder. His purchase of the Louisiana Territory in 1803 opened the way to America's westward expansion. George Washington was the father of his country. In the darkest hours of the Revolution, his courage and resolve seemed never to falter. By sheer force of character, he brought the nation victory in its War of Independence. There were some who wanted to crown him emperor, but Washington would have none of it, choosing instead to nurture, in his own words, the sacred fire of liberty. As our first president, Washington set about to make the lofty ideals of the Declaration of Independence work in practice. For his iron rectitude, for his inspired vision of the future of a free people, and for the dignity he brought to the office of the presidency, Washington will be remembered for as long as men dream of freedom. The great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, guided the destiny of the nation during its greatest trial, the war between the states. "Let us have faith," he said, "that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it." Lincoln was the prophet of America's permanence and of liberty, tolerance, and social justice for all our people. To political freedom, Theodore Roosevelt extended economic freedom. He was the daring trustbuster, passionate conservationist, and friend of the common man. At a time when the U.S. was emerging as a world power, he led the march toward new frontiers, forging new links between East and West with the Panama Canal. We, here in America, hold in our hands the hopes of the world, he wrote, and shame and disgrace will be ours if in our eyes the light of high resolve is dimmed, if we trail in the dust the golden hopes of men. The mountain was dedicated August 10, 1927. The symbol of the moment was a set of drill bits handed to Borglum by President Calvin Coolidge. With his customary showmanship, the sculptor put them right to work on the face of the mountain. For guidance in his design of studio models of the presidents, Borglum studied photographs, portraits, and life masks, using the sculptor's tools of light and shadow to create likenesses with human character and vitality. "90% of the monument was carved with dynamite. The surface stone was cracked and soft. Nearly 500,000 tons of rock were removed to reach granite solid enough for sculpting.
Years from now, I think we can meditate and wonder whether our descendants, because I think they'll still be here, what they will think about us. And let us hope that at least they will give us the benefit of the doubt, that they will believe that we have honestly striven in our day and generation to preserve for our descendants a decent land to live in and a decent form of government to operate under.
I'm done, Johnny.
If you put it in the bag.
Mommy, how many days are we staying here? Awesome. It's kind of cool, huh? Yeah, I'm a kid.
Here, and they ran out of money inside. So that's the mountain doesn't.
Now we are currently sitting and standing in an original studio of Gutzom Borglums. This was built in 1939 in response to the popularity of the project. At that point in time, word had already spread around the country as to what was going on here at Mount Rushmore. So people were coming from miles around to see the carving in progress. Now also directly behind me here we have an original scale model built by Borglum. This is the 9th of 9 original models here that was built here at Mount Rushmore. Now as you can see, it is a little bit more complete than what you see out there on the mountain today. And that is because this is what they intended for it to look like. Because of bad rock, they were unable to do so. If you look outside at Washington's Middle, you'll see a dark gray patch of rock. That is a mica schist. It is very flaky and fragile and will not hold a carving. They discovered that early on in the project, and it runs the entire course of the mountain. So they were unable to complete as far down as what you see here today. Because the main tool that they're going to be using is what we have here called dynamite. This is an example of the dynamite. Now, I said this is the main tool because 90% of the entire mountain is carved using dynamite. All of that rubble you see at the base of the mountain is a result of the blasting and the carving. We have about 400,000 tons of rock sitting at the base there. So this was very important. Now as you can see, I have a couple of different lengths here. This represents the different lengths that they would have used while they were up there. The bigger ones are obviously for the bigger initial blasts. The smaller ones as they got closer and closer to where they wanted to go.
After learning all about Mount Rushmore, we received junior ranger patches from one of the park rangers.
Your badge, good job. Well, way to go, guys. Is that your book?